U.S. still in recession, and a $3.8 trillion budget. President Obama declared in presenting his new 10-year budget proposal on Monday that our fiscal situation remains unacceptable, but he insisted that the country pursue his ambitious domestic agenda despite facing swollen budget deficits for the foreseeable future. Just as it would be a terrible mistake to borrow against our children's future to pay our way today, it would be equally wrong to neglect their future by failing to invest in areas that will determine our economic success in this new century, Mr. Obama said at the White House. The budget projects that the deficit will peak at nearly $1.6 trillion in the current fiscal year, a post-World War II record, and then supposedly decline but remain at economically troublesome levels over the remainder of the decade. In the coming fiscal year, 2011, which begins in October, the projected shortfall would be under $1.3 trillion. Over 10 years, according to the administration, if all goes well, the budget would save an estimated $1.2 trillion, mainly by ending the BUSH tax cuts for the richest Americans and freezing some domestic spending for 3 years. But that total is roughly 1/5 of the size of the debt that will pile up from now to 2020, the budget shows. So, in the short run, some relatively minor domestic programs, as well as big-ticket military equipment, would be cut or eliminated, while education and civilian research would get big increases. Wealthy Americans, big banks, and oil and gas companies would pay more in taxes, but the middle class and small businesses would get additional tax cuts worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Republican leaders in Congress, in a flurry of news releases, dismissed the Obama budget with the identical phrase, "more of the same." More spending, more taxes, and more debt, added Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the Senate Republican leader. Mr. Obama, in the budget message that came with the fiscal volumes, said most of the debt owes to the spending and tax cuts of the past decade, when Republicans controlled both the White House and Congress. He took credit for having made hard choices and painful trade-offs not seen in Washington for many years. Mr. Obama's budget director said the president would keep his campaign promise to cut the deficit he inherited in half by the end of his term. But that will be no easy task. By the administration's calculation, the deficit for fiscal year 2013 will be equal to just over 4% of the gross domestic product. When Mr. Obama took office, the projected $1.3 trillion deficit was equivalent to more than 9% of the gross domestic product. Even so, the president's budget shows that by the end of the decade, annual deficits will begin moving up inexorably, reflecting the fast-rising cost of health and retirement programs for an aging baby boom population. In fact, in reality, it could be much worse. Economists generally say annual deficits should not consistently exceed 3%, while Mr. Obama's budget would get no closer than 3.6% in any of the next 10 years, if all goes well. He proposes to reach the lower level by 2015 with the help of a yet-to-be-named bipartisan commission. an uncertain prospect at best, given the intensity of Republicans' opposition to his agenda. The House and Senate Republican leaders have signaled strongly that they will not cooperate. Even Senator Judd Gregg of New Hampshire, the senior Republican on the Senate Budget Committee, who unsuccessfully sponsored a bill to create a bipartisan debt reduction commission by law, declined in an interview to say he would serve on a presidential commission if asked. I would have to see how it's structured and whether I thought it was real and viable or just political cover for the Democrats in an election year, Mr. Gregg said. All budgets are at bottom statements of a president's or a party's priorities, and in his latest document, Mr. Obama made plain that he is standing by his, undaunted by either the legislative setbacks of the past year or the sluggish economic recovery. His $3.8 trillion budget for fiscal year 2011 incorporates his signature proposals to overhaul the healthcare system and energy policies, although they are languishing in Congress. Education, civilian research, food and drug safety, and biomedical research would all get more money. For NASA, Mr. Obama proposed to cancel plans to return to the moon, but sought $18 billion in spending for new technologies that could take humans further into space. The budget request for the Department of Health and Human Services was $81.3 billion, up from $79.6 billion a year ago. The National Institutes of Health's budget request rose by $1 billion to $32 billion, more than was requested last year. Few reductions he called for would be easy or politically painless. Dozens of the 120 programs Mr. Obama has proposed to cut or kill are retreads because Congress rejected or ignored them last year. Mr. Obama said it was just common sense, for example, to kill a program to restore lands at abandoned mines that already have been cleaned up. But Western senators of both parties blocked that idea in 2009. Mr. Obama does not make the really hard choices about entitlement programs, Medicare and Medicaid, especially, and about taxes that most budget economists say are essential to cut annual deficits and to begin paying down an accumulated debt. The nation's publicly held debt, much of it owed to China and other foreign creditors, by 2020 would equal 77% of the gross domestic product, the highest level since 1950. Then, the post-war debt was on its way down. Now, it is on its way up to unsustainable heights or levels. While the President has proposed to save hundreds of billions of dollars in Medicare as part of his health care overhaul, he would expand Medicaid, which covers low-income people and many nursing home residents. Both government health programs are exempt from the 3-year domestic spending freeze that Mr. Obama proposed, as is spending for national security and veterans programs. Many budget economists say that the President's campaign promise against raising taxes on any Americans making less than $250,000 also is a big hurdle to significant deficit reduction. The President will ask the Commission to recommend by December a plan to balance the budget by the 2015 fiscal year on the proposed bipartisan commission, not counting interest payments on the national debt. But that still would leave a deficit of nearly 3% of gross domestic product or more, reflecting just how large a share of the budget the debt costs are going to be. Congressional Democratic leaders have committed to hold a vote on whatever plan a supposed bipartisan commission produces. You're better off trying to find out if there's any chance that some things can emerge on a bipartisan basis from the commission. If all goes well. And again, these are more signs of the end times. Transition days. The transition is an ongoing process, and there are many signs happening daily.